Here we are in Trench 2. This is the trench in which we're investigating our Mid-Saxon cemetery. We're at the end of week 3 and the archaeology in here is really starting to resolve itself. So what we've been able to determine is that this is an area of quite intense burial over successive generations. How do we know that? It's because we've seen lots of intercutting burial, different phases of burial going on top of each other. So this is a part of the cemetery, in other words, that was quite heavily used. We're seeing this intercutting right across the trench. So we've got an area over here where we've got dense array of burial of multiple phases, and we've got select graves at the other side of the trench where we've got a similar thing happening. So that's really quite a turn up for us. We weren't expecting such an intensity of burial across this entire area. So it's telling us that it's an extensive cemetery and it was used over successive generations. So one of the key research questions we had going into this for this trench was, who are the people being buried here? Are they the monastic brethren, or is this a lay cemetery? And I think we can say confidently it's the latter. How do we know that? Well, we have mixed genders here, we have male, female, but we also have younger individuals. We have adolescents, and indeed we have a neonatal burial within one of our areas of very tight intercutting burial at the top end of our trench. So I think we've demonstrated the fact that this is the wider population that perhaps were the dependent community attached to the monastery being buried in this locale. There may well be other cemeteries as well, we know this from other sites, and burial foci within the wider monastic landscape. But this is certainly one of the main cemeteries that was established in association with the monastery here at Cookham. The burials that we have here are, the rite is very orderly in the sense that we have clear north-south rows. These are Christian burials, so head at the west end, they're supine, they're laid flat on their backs. There's evidence that some of the individuals were buried in shrouds, so we can see that from body position. And we can also see some quite interesting trends over time in relation to placement of the body. So in our latest phase of burial, most of the heads are facing forwards. However, with the earlier phases, they're often turned to the right. So that seems to be a trend that we can certainly see that trend over time in a change of body positions, which is very interesting. So we're in Trench 1, and this trench is, for me, hugely exciting, and our thinking of the archaeology in here has really changed radically since last year, since we first uncovered the archaeological horizons. What we've got in this trench ostensibly is a succession of timber buildings that were right at the core of the monastery. So we're within the monumental core of the monastery. And we're uncovering, or we have uncovered, the ground plan for one of the main timber buildings within the site. So what all these people are doing is that they're excavating individual post holes and post pits that form successive phases of a north-south building on this footprint here. We've got floor levels also surviving from some of the phases of these buildings, and at the top end we've got a beautiful hearth and a sort of clay pad next to it, which is, we don't know exactly what the function of that is, but it's clearly forming one of the sort of interior feature within the building itself. So by the end of this season we'll have clear ground plans and walls for the various buildings that are established and replaced each other on this site. Archaeology of this kind is incredibly rare. We don't often have the opportunity to excavate the core buildings within monastic complexes of mid-Saxon date. So this is fantastic archaeology. We're in our northern extension trench, so we've excavated this just to see and explore how far our settlement goes, our monastic settlement goes, and to see where the early medieval riverfront might be. So we're standing on a Middle Saxon land surface. We've got gravel spreads and yards all the way through this area, and this runs up to this really substantial, what we think is a wall foundation. It's a linear arrangement of packed stones. It's running beyond the confines of our trench. It's substantial. It's some sort of structure here. It may be part of a building, or it may be a revetment at the edge of the settlement. And then we've got beyond it lots of midden material that's been dumped at this spot. We don't know what it's filling. It may be a series of intercutting pits. It may be a boundary ditch of some kind, but that's produced lots of refuse material, pottery, animal bone. We got one or two nice iron fittings, a bit of bone comb out of here yesterday, some loom weights. So, you know, we might be at the periphery of the settlement where things are being dumped. But what we can say is that generally our Middle Saxon archaeology extends quite a long way out towards the river. So it just continues with lots of activity represented. So this is an extensive settlement. So we're at the end of week 3. We've got 1 week left, and traditionally on excavations, the final week often brings unexpected discoveries. So it's going to be really fascinating to see, you know, what happens in the final stages. So I'll be giving you an update, a sort of final end of dig update next Friday. So watch this space.